Thank you for taking time out of what I know are extremely busy schedules to be with us this morning, particularly for the MSU folks, the start of finals week and all that good stuff. So thank you. My name is Jerry Reed. I work in a unit here on campus called MSU Global. I'm the Director of Academic Entrepreneurship, which means I get to work with faculty on really cool projects, essentially the gist of that. We're excited today to be talking about badges in K-12 education. And we have some really cool people with us that have worked on a project in extension in the 4-H area. Jacob Dedecker back here, and Michelle Ribant, and then Keesa Johnson-Muhammad. So they're going to be talking. I'll let them go into a little bit more depth about their backgrounds and their relationship to this project. A couple of things logistically. Coffee's on its way, so feel free, this is pretty informal, so if you need a cup of coffee, you're jonesing really bad, don't hesitate to grab a cup of coffee. There's water and snacks on the table. Bathrooms are located out back by the elevator if you need to take advantage of that during the session. We will do our best to end at 11:30 today so you can move on to your other activities. I did want to make you aware of a couple of things that are coming up. For those of you who aren't familiar with this type of a session, these are called Fanning the Flames. And many of you, I think, have participated in our annual Igniting Innovation session that we do typically in October, where we bring together projects from across the university that are innovative in nature. And as a result of that meeting, I think we're going on our 5th one this year. After the first one, folks said, you really need to do this more often than once a year. So we started the Fanning the Flame session. So the idea behind these sessions are to hear a little bit about a cool project, an idea, something that a group is working on, and then have an opportunity to dialogue and talk about it. So that's what will happen today. You'll see a little bit about this project, and then we'll get talking about it. So if you have questions, if you want to push a little bit, if you're wondering about how it might apply to what you're doing, that's really what these sessions are about. So we try to do one each month. The next one, if you want to mark your calendars, is Thursday, January 29th from 11 to 12:30. That'll be with John Spink. He's a faculty member in the College of Veterinary Medicine, working in the area of food fraud, and he's one of our inaugural Innovation Faculty Fellows. So he's going to be talking about his project and some of the interesting things that have happened in that project. And if you haven't already gotten an invitation, you will be getting one, so keep your eye out for that. I also encourage you, if you have time, and I know time is limited, but our offices are actually on the 3rd floor of this building in 301, and we have a gallery space where we feature different art, photos, different types of creative works. We happen to have on display right now Kurt Stepnitz's photographs. He's a university photographer, been with the university for over 30 years. One of the things that we're featuring right now are the work that he's done with faculty as he's traveled around the globe with them on research projects. So there's some really interesting photos up there. So I encourage you to stop up, take a walk through the gallery if you have time. And then Kurt will be back with us this week on Thursday from 3:30 to 5 in what we call an innovation circle. So it's an opportunity to get intimate with the artist in conversation. You have a really cool conversation about what inspires him, how innovation factors into his work, and then we usually try to tie that back to how innovation and creativity can influence the work that you do. So if you're interested in those things, please mark those down, and we look forward to seeing you at those events. So without further ado, who started this thing off? You? Jacob?
We'll start with Jacob.
All right, so I'll give you Jacob. Thank you again.
I'll go up here. Get started.
So thank you. It's a privilege to be here. I work with MSU Extension, 4-H Youth Development. How many people have heard of 4-H and know what that is?
Yep.
You are impressive, or you're a bunch of liars. Either way. With so many divisions within MSU, I normally want to start with that just to make sure that we're on the same page. So 4-H in Michigan, 9 to 19 years of age is our young people. We actually have about 200,000 young people within the state that are 4-H members, 20,000 volunteers. This question, which got to digital badging, didn't start with digital badging at all. The question that really came up was from some of our young people, some of the volunteers actually 2 years ago, 2.5 years ago. And the question was, in 4-H, we do so much learning activities. One of the things we talk about is connecting in-school learning with real-world experiences. So we want to help build framework. We want to build knowledge base. We want to build skills and expertise. When they go into the classroom, they can connect that. They're ready. They build on those learning experiences. There's a continuum that's there. And then some of the projects they do is pretty intense. We've got kids in robotics. We've got kids in bioenergy. We've got kids in civic engagement, different principles. So they're saying, I'm already doing all this stuff within 4-H. I'm doing this after school. I'm doing this in summer. I've got all these camps that I'm doing. It's fairly rigorous. I'm proud of what I've been able to learn and grow. Where do I get credit for that? I mean, that's a great experience for me, but where do I get credit for that? Because I go back into my schools, and some of the stuff I'm learning the same thing. Some of it's a continuum and takes me to the next level, but I'm not getting credit for it anywhere. Could we? Could we get credit for this? The stuff that I'm doing after school, the stuff that I'm doing all summer long, could that somehow connect to my high school degree? Could this contribute towards my high school degree? Could this contribute to my GPA? Could this help me in other frameworks, maybe get a job? Could this help me get into college? What else can we do? We're building better people, but we're not necessarily giving credit for them for what they're learning. That's where the question started 2.5 years ago. We had conversations with MDE then about what this might look like, and they were interested. They were excited. I remember the first meeting we had with several of us sat around the table and talked about it. We didn't have a means to pursue it at that time. It was exciting, but we didn't know what to do. It's kind of stagnant for a year or two. We talked. We said we need to talk with some school administrators. We need to talk with some school districts to see how this could be used locally. It's all right if we have this program and 50 people attend 4-H Renewable Energy Camp, which we'll talk about in just a minute, and they go home and they say, I've learned all this stuff, and they go to their principal and their teachers, I've learned all this great stuff. And then they're going to say, great, but they don't know what to do with that. They need something to connect it with. So it really has to start locally as well as statewide. So where digital badging came in is not all that long ago. There was a grant opportunity through Mozilla Foundation, and Michigan After School Partnership actually reached out with MDE and with Michigan State University, because we've been already engaging this, and said, here's a digital badge project. It's really something that young people can earn a digital badge through some type of learning experience, through knowledge gain or life skill development, and they could earn this digital badge. And kind of the question is this is kind of a new horizon. How do we use digital badges? Could they be used for helping young people receive validation and legitimize the learning that they're doing in after-school settings and actually connect to and give credit towards their high school degree? If they participate in a summer camp, could they get credit for that towards their high school degree? Could that actually be used by college admissions as something besides a GPA, besides other type of extracurricular activities? Could digital badging be one of the parameters, one of the data points when we review students' eligibility for admission into a university or other learning institutes, that digital badging actually be a component for that? Could employers actually look at this as they're looking to find the best qualified young people to fill their positions, and they're looking at resumes, they're looking at GPA? Could digital badging be another component that employers use to validate the learning and the experiences that young people have so they can best fill the positions within the company? And the answer on a large framework is yeah, we think that it is. But there's not a lot of data out there that's really looked at it in a setting that needs to be looked at it. So there's lots of different things. People are using digital badging all over the place. And what we needed to do is try and orchestrate some framework and some hardwire some things so we can answer some key questions to help move this forward. That's one of the why this venture really joined, to say, how could we look at this? This was a small seed grant. This was not a lot of money, but it got us started. And we kind of felt like we had the right people around the table to finally have this conversation and see what we can do with it. One of the things that we decided to do is digital badging is often used kind of with some hard curriculum. All right, you sit down, you take a class, maybe it's 5 weeks long, you have this curriculum, you sit it down, there's a test at the end of it, it's easy to evaluate. Did you do this or did you not? You get a digital badge for it. However, in an after-school setting, which is really what we wanted to try and look at, particularly in how 4-H works, is we have 5-day camps. We have 2-day camps. We have kids that are engaged in things for 3 years in club settings where they're working on hard design challenges and life skill type work. It's not curriculum. It's not do step A, B, C, and D to get to your finished project. It's much more abstract than that. But there's learning achievements that are taking place. So what we wanted to try and look at and see from a camp model, what does this look like? All right, let's do digital badges if you've got curriculum, but nobody's really done it in a camp model before, to our knowledge. When we got into this, I didn't even know it at the time, but some colleagues from the University of Nebraska have done digital badging in 4-H around robotics, around set curriculum. So they already had a model set for it, but it was a set curriculum thing. So we said, let's go out and right field here, and let's look at a model that's never been done and something that has, in my opinion, bigger application, because there's a lot of people doing after-school programs that are more informal than that. It's not a hard set curriculum. It's more ambiguous. It's more organic. Let's study what the kids want to type of learn. There's that all over the place. So let's take a look at that model and see what we can do. Renewable Energy Camp came to the table, and as we're all talking about what do we want to use, what types of models we want to explore that we think can help move research forward in the area of digital badging. This is a camp that I used to run where I was in charge of STEM programs for 4-H. It's about bioenergy. It's one of the only camps in the Midwest that has kids come to campus like MSU and learn about bioenergy from our research and experts. It's kind of a hot topic. We have 50 kids that come in, anywhere from Western UP up to Detroit, with interests anywhere, and I want to create a better solar cell to I want to grow switchgrass in my backyard because I know it can be produced and for some cellulosic material and go towards bioenergy components. So a wide group. 5-day camp. I have them on campus for 5 days, and we have some rigorous learning that takes place. It's not curriculum. We have projects. They actually design a solar car, test it, and race it. They do that for 2.5 days, and they go through lots of tests trying to figure out what the best design is. They all take a sample of biofuel home with them that they actually produce. We go out to Kellogg Biological Station that MSU owns, for those of you that are familiar with that. Harvest the crops, break it down, process it. Each of them takes a tube of biofuel home with them and tries to run it in their lawnmower or something, which works just fine. So that's kind of the state that we're in. So one of the questions early on was we're used to having a curriculum set that's much more rigorous, and here's the standards we're trying to meet, these are the outcomes that we're trying to do. Then we present this type of after-school program that's really kind of hairy, that here's what we try to do, and we have all these different activities, but they're not set standards. Thankfully, MDE specialists were able to come with us and say, you know what, if we're going to do some digital badging, we have to come up with some more constructs, a little bit harder setting with this. And we were able to work together to try and do that. That was a huge experience for us. I think we'll talk about that a little bit more as we go. But to provide a little bit more background, which I wanted to do in this opening session, was this didn't start with digital badging. The question was, how can young people that are learning and are learning a lot outside of school get credit for the learning that they're doing? Digital badging was the means which we could actually start to pursue that question. This was the first of what we hope to be many research projects looking at this, because now that we have the partnership established, we have a collaboration, we got our feet wet, we kind of know what we're doing. This was some mini questions to get us started. Now we've got a whole lot more. And so we're hoping that this group can really form as a leadership moving forward to start answering some of these harder questions, because a whole lot more has happened. And the interest here tonight this morning is a great example of where we're at. People want to know, what is digital badging? What does this mean? What does this mean to me? What does this mean to education? We're on the horizon of this. It's kind of an exciting place for us to be, and we think that there's a whole lot more momentum that we can carry forward from this too. Renewable Energy Camp was the first place that had happened. End of June was the first time that we did it. We had the kids come on board. We had to sign out some extra signatures and permission rights to say, hey, you're going to be being able to earn a digital badge through your experiences today. They were all on board with that. They didn't even know what a digital badge was. They thought it was cool. Most of them are in that 12 to 14 age range. You know, they were into that. And once we talked about it, they were all on board. They thought that this was great. I'll share some evaluations data later on what they felt about the project. But this was the first model on how we made that work. Michelle, Keesa, did I miss anything in that?
No, I think that's a great framework for what we did. I'm just going to jump in here. And I'm from the Michigan Department of Ed as an educator on loan. You saw in that front slide that really I'm the director of Gen Ed up in the Eastern Upper Peninsula for our 19 districts up there. But since we've been working on, this was one of my first projects when I came this summer as an educator on loan, and so relevant exactly for the reasons that Jake talked about. The students are doing all kinds of cool stuff outside of school, but what does it mean for their career and college readiness? That's the thing I handed out for you. The standards that we're so used to in education, that's what we measure in all of our formal assessments, you know, all of the MEP tests, and now the new MyStep test, and that's happening this spring. But it is very hard to get at those things like communication, problem solving, technology readiness. So those are really some of the things that these camp settings and these after-school programs greatly enhance. And that's what the Michigan business community has come to the education community and said, we need to know not only if students are good at basic knowledge and, understanding the formal standards, but can they apply their knowledge and what they've learned to real world situations. And so this is the sort of the overview of the camp, and Jake did a great job of talking about how that came to be and evolved. But what we couldn't do at MDE was we had no understanding of the badging system itself. Because for us, like I earn badges. If you're a gamer at all, you know that you kids earn badges as they're gaming and getting better at their proficiency levels in games. But there are also games like in our settings for even the data system that we use in our K-12 education. If you write a number of reports, if you do this certain complexity things, you start to earn little badges. My employer does not look at that and give me a raise for that yet. But at least the industries out there are getting sort of used to that badging mentality, and kids are very used to it with the gamification of their kind of lives. So when we really happily met Keesa, and that was in the most roundabout of ways, because my colleagues, Ruth Ann Hodges and Megan Schraubman, that work with Jake and I on that alignment of his camp to the state standards, had attended a session here where Keesa and her department had presented, and she had the last slide, contact me thing. So I called Keesa and said, hey, we're ready to do something with this. Can you just help us out by showing us what MSU has in place? Because the thing that you had presented on was the HR, now that we're in their building, the MSU program that's developed here to acknowledge employees for what they've done, in work and outside. I don't know if outside of work, but trainings that they've done. And then Keesa was explaining the secondary tier, which is available to university professors to acknowledge students for additional work that they're doing as well. So that was really fortuitous. And then Jake had been working with Lorraine Thorson in the MDE after school program area, and they had really gone a long way down this road for all the reasons that he had already talked about. But the missing link was that alignment to the standards piece. And so we had to kind of figure out what we were going to do. So we really had to kind of come up to speed on what is a digital badge and how do you go about making them meaningful. And that is really the hardest part. It's going to continue to be the hardest part into the future. So we learned what we could about digital badging from this perspective, and you can see what this is, a complete picture of the learner. And that's really what we want to present, is the students are working hard, in this case in the 5-day renewable energy camp. They are doing some very specific projects that are absolutely aligned with what they're supposed to be learning in high school science. And so we had to figure out how to do it. So after much discussion, that we came up with 4 renewable energy badges. One was for participation, which meant that they attended the session, they did the work, and then the students at the midpoint of the week went into either a biofuel, solar, or wind energy pathway. And so that became the way we divided up the camp for badging. And embedded in each one of those badges is the particular standards that go with each one. The process piece, that student level piece, thankfully, the instructors at 4-H were really good about getting their students into where do they go to pick up their badges, how can they share their badges once they receive them. Because the thing about these little badges, they look just like a little icon, but there's a lot of information behind them, criteria behind them. And that's where the alignment with the MDE group, with Megan and Ruth Ann and Lorraine and myself came in, and that was very exciting. So that once the student receives these badges, they can send them out via email, Twitter, you name it, Facebook. They can post the badges, but they can also, and this is going to be the interesting part, they email them to their teachers, and then their teachers have to decide what they're going to do with them. When you click on the badge, you see, kind of what's behind them, but, oh, that's the same one. And this is a brief descriptor, not that you can read all this, but we worked really hard on the details of the criteria for each one of the badges. And this is what a teacher or a parent or anybody would see once they picked up their badge. And then embedded even further in that is the actual standards that are represented with the badge. So just this process piece would have been impossible had we not made Keesa. Like we had, personally, Jake, I know I'm speaking for you, but I would not have been able to do this, to go to first of all, the kids had to set up their own backpack in Mozilla, so we figured that all out, and that was pretty straightforward, and that was external to MSU. But the badge creation itself, we would not have been able to do had MSU not forged that, that pathway already. So that's what really became the piece that made it possible for us to go forward quickly, because remember, this is a week-long camp, and you talk about building the airplane while you're on it. We were doing that, and we still are, really, because the kids now can go pick up their badges, but we are now working at Michigan Department of Ed with teachers on what do you do once a student comes to you and says, I earned a badge in renewable energy. At the very least, what we want teachers to do is say, okay, you are seriously the expert, because when I'm in class, in my whatever class, maybe this would come up in environmental science, this could come up in physics, this could come up in a number of ways. The teacher needs to know that the student that's been through this class, this camp, is the expert. No other student knows as much as he or she does. And they should defer to them, they should talk to them, they should have them bring in whatever they created as an artifact as part of their camp, and have them explain the specifics of growing growing switchgrass for the biofuel component, building the solar component for the solar energy car, doing the wind, building or the particulars of the blade length for the wind unit that was created. They should really defer to them.
Have you seen some of that happening? Are there?
Not yet.
Okay.
But we are going to be watching that, and that's, I think, where the research part is going to have to come in, because the other issue is the credit part that Jake talked about, because we really want this to happen. Like, what are we going to do at MDE? We would like to work with high school teachers and middle school teachers on stringing together badges, and there could be an infinite combination of badges. If kids go to all kinds of stuff. We want to be able to string together a series of badges for high school credit, for middle school credit, and at the very least for acknowledgement within their transcript systems. So that's where we are very involved in our student information systems, student SIS systems. You guys have them here too. How do we embed these badges with their criteria and evidence into our SIS system so that it prints out to the students in their, what we call a dashboard? When the kids log in, they can see where they are kind of grade-wise and in their classroom activities. We want to start adding that into our SIS system. So we have now a small group of people from ISDs around the state that are using a particular SIS system called Illuminate, and they're working on that conversion process. So how could we take the icon with the embedded criteria and evidence, bring it into our SIS system, and then begin to meet with teachers and say, okay, if you have teachers at individual districts, and this is where it's going to get complex, are going to have to meet almost as a panel and say, okay, we have a bunch of kids that have submitted badges for our consideration. Let's check out the criteria and evidence and see if we want to start affixing credit to that, and how. So one of the things that we're going forward with right now is the FIRST robotics. So that's another huge, this will be, Jake had 50 students that participated in his summer camp, but that same camp is also being delivered in an after-school format at Eastern, correct?
A different camp.
A different camp. It's not the renewable energy camp? Okay. So they're working on that. But around the state of Michigan right now, the FIRST robotics competition kicks off January 3rd. This is an incredibly involved program. So we and I would say Anne Marie Smith at the Michigan Department of Ed and I have been meeting with coaches around the state and They have come up with 11 potential badges for this year. Now, as of last Tuesday, we narrowed it down to 3. We're going to go forward with the general participation, which is a minimum of 60 hours, and that will be less meaningful to teachers because it just means you kind of showed up and you did it. But we're looking at marketing and electronics, which have very, very specific attributes associated with them. And this is an example of what students will have to demonstrate and be able to do on their own in order to earn the electronics badge. Now, within those are all the specific state standards that are represented, including some of the communication, problem solving, and technology pieces. So after dozens and dozens of hours of meeting with some of the most, like the long-term coaches for the First Robotics League, this is what we've come up with. Now we have to take that to the Michigan First Robotics people and say, okay, are you cool with this? If we start issuing some digital badges, because there is no reason these kids are not getting credit for, like if they strung together the 4-H Renewable Energy Camp and the participation in First Robotics, that could be a half a semester in the what's required in the state to graduate, which is a third-year science experience beyond chemistry and physics, or biology and chemistry, or biology and physics. That could easily be a half credit's worth of time if you look at the time spent and what was learned. So that's exactly where we're at. And then these guys have gone nuts, is the only way to describe it, because there are students that participate from 9th through 12th grade. And they are like target locked on the electronics component. So they want to do like a bronze, silver, and gold level badges, which would be super meaningful to potential employers. If you have a kid that in 10th grade can do all of that and make, these are those big robots that you sometimes see, you know, these are the big ones that shoot baskets and move stuff. That means something. So we want to put that right on their transcript, acknowledge that they've been given some credit for that, and acknowledge that they are in every way, they know this. They know the electronics component, or they know the marketing component, or in the best possible world, then counselors and coaches could start having students broaden, you know, what they do around robotics, because it's not always good to only know one aspect. You have to collaborate, work as a team, and that's where some of those career and college readiness skills on that handout come in. So this is moving quickly. It's moving quickly for all the right reasons, because the students are, I just judged the first Lego robotics, the little kids one on Saturday up at Lake Superior State University, and the amount of work that those the kids put in to make their little robots go for this year's challenge is just phenomenal. I only wish that they were that engaged in their classroom level activities, right? I mean, and that's coming from an educator. So there's a lot of stuff happening, and I think you guys here are more aware of sort of the professional development acknowledgement piece, which is happening in Southwest Michigan for the Great Start Readiness preschool teachers. So they're trying to acknowledge those teachers for specific pre-K professional development that they're attending, but there's no way to then move that to the state credentialing system. So we're going to have to work that out as it goes. But that will at least be displayed on the teachers' web pages and parents so that they know they did some things. At the science level, the Van Andel Institute for Science has a system with Allegan County. So when the teachers attend 6 to 8 week programs in the summer at the Institute, they're going to be earning digital badges that they can take to their employers, put out on their web pages, let parents know that they've done this, that sort of thing, and that's moving along quickly. The flip we're trying to make there is to get these digital badges a part of the state credentialing system for ongoing continuing education units like you guys are familiar with here. And how do we do that? So from a university perspective, I would think that it would be important to get out in front of that too for the PD, the teacher ed, and other professions that you support with continuing education credits. This is, I believe, going to be a way that that can all be acknowledged into the future. Okay, and then Michigan Virtual University is also doing a badging system for their online instructors. And you know, you guys have them here. The Global, MSU Global is a huge example of that. But we have teachers all over the state of Michigan now that don't leave their homes every day. They teach from home because we have so many online learning options available to kids in high school now, and middle school actually. And in my case, in the UP, our seat time waiver extends down to grade 5. So students from 5th grade up can take some or all of their coursework from home. It can get complicated, but it's great. So they're looking at a system that gives badges for specific blended and online learning professional development, so that when schools want to take a class from MIBU, they can look a little more closely at the credentials that the particular teacher who's teaching the science, art, whatever class has. And because if you have a bad online experience, you're so turned off by it that you don't want to do it again. So they want to let people know up front that these teachers have had a lot of training and are working on that. And they do a great job. You know, they are some people that have been teaching blended learning for at least, oh my gosh, back in the old ITV days, at least 15 years. They're experts. And so now I'm going to turn over to Keesa, and she's going to explain, you know, some of the stuff you have going on here. But you can see how that supported us, because again, we would never have been able to get as far as we have with this project that we're talking about today.
Thank you. Hello, everyone. How you guys doing? Thanks so much. I'm so happy that they felt really supported by what we do. My name is Keesa Johnson Muhammad, and I work for MSU IT Services, Teaching and Learning, and my team is called Learning Design and Technology. And we are a bunch of instructional designers, graphic artists, programmers, and we're here to support the university on instructional purposes for online, face-to-face, and blended. And I absolutely love what I do. As Michelle was speaking about Michigan Virtual University, they have a team of instructional designers, and also their mission is similar to mine. Like for me as an instructional designer, my true role is to usher in meaningful learning experiences. Meaningful. And you might hear me say I'll use organic a lot, because I think we get caught up a little bit in trends, but my job is to make sure that the students and the teachers are learning. Like, I'm a true advocate for learning. So with that, under Brendan Guthner, who is a great knowledge and thought leader of time, he was like, well, hey, how about we create a badge system? So we worked with Seton Hall, and we did an open badging system in collaboration with them and a couple of other universities. And it's a pilot project. It's been out around 2012, and we opened it up to the MSU community so people can use it in different forms of fashions. We didn't really know we didn't want to put like and say this is how you use the system. We wanted the community to kind of look at it for themselves and say, hey, here's some feedback, you know, I want to use it for this. But truly our role was to create this system for motivational purposes. And one of the things that we do a breakfast series 6 times a year, and we talk about online pedagogy and blended learning concepts, and now we're also opening up to face-to-face classrooms. And Michelle and her team, it was a few of you guys, they came to a breakfast series and we were talking about badges. And I thought it would be cool. We had the system, and I was like, well, let's talk about it. Let's talk about the motivational aspects about badging. And badging, I think a lot of people use it in a way that they talk about gamification a lot. But badging has been around for quite a while. And within that lecture that we were giving a presentation, we were talking a little bit about the history. And a lot of the history goes back into the Boy Scouts, but we could take it back a little bit further about symbols and symbolisms. And back in Aboriginal culture, you know, the symbols were given to people who went through certain various rites of passage ceremonies to obtain something, and it means something. And in today's culture, I look at badging more so like, here's my certification of a skill that I've developed, or you know, I used to have a portfolio, and I walked around with my portfolio, and it had all my things of like, if I did a Red Cross class or an Excel class, I took my portfolio and I took it to work, or I took it to a job interview, and I'm like, well, here's my qualifications. And so that's a big, huge push in the badging community. It's much more so about credentialing and skill building, less about gamification, but people do use it in that way. But when you do use it in that way, you really have to be immersed in how they are used in gaming. Because I took a class before, and they wanted to gamify it in a way, and it was so horrible because it was a horrible experience. It was a horrible online experience because the professor didn't really commit to what he was trying to do. He wanted it to be like a quest, but it was just more so I was reading my book and I was clicking buttons. So when it comes to badges, there has to be some meaning behind the badge to make it important for the learner. There has to be motivation behind it. And I'm a real big advocate of the motivational learning theory by John Keller. The ARCS model is about attention, relevance, confidence, and satisfaction. That is what truly motivates people to want to learn or want to do anything. It's not just because it's a badge. There's a meaning behind that badge. And I had spoke with Jacob and Michelle before, like, okay, so what's the meaning behind the badge? We talked a lot about that. And I don't know if they really understood. I mean, how did you guys feel when I was saying, okay, what's the meaning behind this? Has to be some meaning attached to it, because if it's no meaning, why should I care about badge? What can I use this badge for? So they had come with a very good sustainable program that children had went through, and they wanted to try to attempt to use digital badging, and I thought it was a perfect way to utilize our system, because this was like a good case study for us. Now, Michelle had talked a little bit about HR resources, so we kind of we use our badging system for motivational purposes, for alternative and competency-based purposes. We also use it for extracurricular activities with the HR component that Michelle was speaking about, and we also use it for like digital representation for Type 3 certificates. So if there's a certificate program like the Series Game Design or the Alternative Energy, we use badging for representations for that, for the MSU community. So this is a little bit what I was talking about, the policy. And here's the graduate certificate. And here's some more information when it comes to what is actual graduate certificate. So entities on campus, they can use our badging system to stamp a badge on the transcript versus them saying, well, grad certificate available. We can also incorporate different types of badging through their program. If they give us a call, we're waiting for a program to kind of take shape. I think the African American Studies is one that we may use it for their undergraduate certificate program. So what's a badge? For us, on how we develop in our badge and our badging system is based upon a description, a criteria, and who's the issuer. It could be a single issuer, or it could be a department level issuer. And to me, the department level issuers are more important, because once that badge is baked in the metadata is in it, you see it, it's valid. It comes from a certain entity, that it's a proven entity. Usually when it's from just a person, you typically use that like which HR purposes maybe, or more so for courses. There's different ways that you can accept a badge in our system. You can either send a link out or use a QR code. We also have conditional releases in D2L if you ever want to use a badge within a course. And it's the actual baking of the badge. Our system bakes the badge, and then you can upload it to Mozilla. So anything else? I think we could talk about a little bit what's next. But before that, I wanted to say that I was quite, I was happy that I got contacted about that breakfast series, because a lot of people in my department, they were like, we don't want to deal with digital badges. They're just trying to gamify things. A lot of my coworkers are very strong in their personal opinions and professional opinions about how we use things. And I love that, because that's how we really get to the root of why and when and how we use things. But luckily, for some reason, I thought that this wasn't a fad. This wasn't a trend, digital badging. It was more of organic growth on how we leverage the web. We're not even hitting the peak of what we can do in the educational field when it comes to the web. And I thought that this was a great organic growth that we could kind of utilize and research some more. Because now they're opening up more programs that are actually talking about badging. Like, it's a badge community. I'm part of the Badge Alliance, the Open Ed Alliance when it comes to badging, and we talk about it on a weekly call on how can we get these badges out here to work? How can they be meaningful? How are they going to be used in the workforce? And there's this great discussion. So I thought this project was great, a great platform for our badging system to use, a great case study as well. So what's next? For us at LearnDad, MSU IT Services Teaching and Learning, we're going to do an open ID with our system where, you know, you could use any type of user login. Currently, you can only use msu.edu. We opened it up with community IDs for this pilot, but we're moving towards open ID. Currently, we have a D2L widget if anybody's interested in using it within D2L, where you can add widgets. And now we're also talking about design standards, and Jacob has shared a little bit about the gold, bronze, and silver standards when it comes to what the badges mean. But there's also a big call for design standards on how a user can actually go in and actually see, like, follow the design without asking an instructional designer to help. Like, it's great to ask us for help to get us to get some understanding about the description and the objectives and the criteria, but there need to be more open design standards when it comes to what a system looks like and how they function across the board. Do you guys have any next steps that you'd like to share?
I think, and I don't know if this is helpful to you, one thing that was helpful to me is I was getting in this conversation, what is a digital badge and all this, and this is how we set it up with our camp, because one of the questions we got a lot is, this sounds great, how do we do this with our camp, or how do we do this with our program? And one of the things we did first is we had to set up a digital backpack, and Keesa mentioned what that was, but to me, I'm like, what does a digital backpack mean? Essentially, it's an online space where you can put all your badges. So all the badges that the kids are getting from a variety of different places, they stick them in that digital badge. So we had, or a digital backpack. So we had to set them up a digital backpack first. So they went in there, went on Mozilla, and it was really easy to do, and we had some descriptions set up. I don't think it took more than 4 minutes for anybody to set up their own digital backpack. They're ready to go. And once they went through the camp, and the faculty and I went through and we looked at each individual and what they did, and as we talked about, they had renewable energy camp with one badge. You showed up to camp, went through the week, you participated in all your groups, you're getting a renewable energy badge, just saying you were here, you did that. But you went in the solar area, that's much more intensive on solar, so you can get a solar badge. So every kid's walking away with 2 badges. Now they got the digital backpack. Now that we have them done, the issuer, in this case, because the kids are 4-H members, right? They were connected to 4-H. So it's important for us to be the issuer of being MSU 4-H Youth Development. They know that. They know me. That's a connection. So the issuer is MSU 4-H Youth Development. Jump in here, Keesa, if I ever say anything that's wrong.
No, okay, no.
And so when they get the badges, they'll see, oh, this is my badge from MSU 4-H Development. That's from the camp that I took part, the camp that I did. They have that in their digital backpack. They may have 40 other badges in there from gaming and other types of things in their digital backpack. This is theirs. As we talked about, they can put on Twitter, Facebook, they can email them anywhere else.
On a website.
On the websites.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the things as we thought about, back to the bronze, silver, and gold, is for a teacher, you're looking through these and saying, you got 40 badges in here. What? I don't know what these are. This one was issued by George, this one by somebody else, this one by MDE and MSU. Obviously, for a teacher, you care about the one that's issued by MSU and MDE, not the ones by everybody else. So how can we pull that out? How can we make that visual? So from the beginning, it kind of stands out in group reporting. That's where the idea came up of the bronze, silver, and gold, which is really a novel approach. And so we've got the badges, and I think on the one we saw on the outline, it was gold, silver, or bronze. And we're trying to have a design approach from the get-go that says, this one might mean something because it really has something on learning. So you can sift through visually on the 40, click on that, and as soon as you click on that, it says right there in the top, this was issued by Michigan State University in support from MDE or whatever language we came up with. So you don't have to sift through all 40 and figure out what this is. You can see that visually, and you can click on it, and boom, it's right there. It tells you what it's all about. So we're hoping that this trend that came up with this project actually snowballs a little bit and continue to go to standardize what we do in badging a little bit different. So it's the same approach as I think that you mentioned they're doing in robotics, which is wonderful. We're doing it with other camp settings too. We started with Renewable Energy Camp. Keesa's working with some colleagues now on some other camps we're talking about. So this was the first of many models that we hope to explore. We used the camp thing first just because organic, and nobody's really done it in that way before. So now we're looking at workshops. We're looking at, if I'm a part of a 4-H club that meets for 3 years and focuses on veterinary science, because I want to be a veterinarian, there's 3 years of stuff that can go into there. So how do we break that apart and receive digital badging for the learning that takes place within a club setting? That's not necessarily a camp, it's not in a workshop, it's a 3-year-long club setting. So lots of different models that we can explore this. But I think we're pretty excited about some of the design work and that gold, silver, bronze model and how it could be used, because this is one little pocket here, but by creating something as simple as this could really help our users, our teachers, figure out what does this mean to me and how can I use this locally. So one of the few things we took out of the camp. The digital backpack, that's how I was trying to visualize what does that mean. That's where the kids store all their badges, and we're hoping that these badges pop a little bit and saying this is a little bit of significance maybe than the rest of them.
So you mentioned floating around the portfolio, right?
Mm-hmm.
Physical binder, or however you chose to capture those things and present that. I wonder in this space, like at the MBE level or in 4-H, one of the things when you tote around the portfolio is your job to then present what's in the portfolio. Right? So when you go to an interview or you are trying to get into a certain club or activity or whatever you might be doing that's drawing on those experience and those things that you've created. Is there any thought or is there anything that you're aware of that helps the person, the student in this case, sift through that backpack? Like you said, okay, there's some meaningful things in there, but then there's, okay, I got the level 20 on how to kill a zombie, or okay, or whatever game I'm playing, which may have meaning in certain spaces, but probably for some of the things that we'd be interested in doing, maybe not so much. Is there anything that you're aware of, like even in the Badge Alliance, or you hear a lot about employers talking about it. Now, a lot of these, the age group we're talking about here, they're still maybe a few years away from that experience, but ultimately they're going to have things accumulate in their backpack. So I'm curious about how do you take that. I mean, I understand how to present a portfolio because I did the same thing. I toted one around. But how do I use what might be in this now digital backpack to really kind of share? Because I think that's one of there are probably different emphasis that will come. And one would be a student saying, hey, what I did was valuable, and here it is, and I can show you. Another is teachers recognizing the value. Another is employers recognizing the value. Another is statewide systems saying, yeah, it's important. So there's probably a number of influencers in that. But from a student's perspective, how can they use that backpack to?
That's a great question. I know it's a university over in the UK. More so our brothers and sisters over in the UK, they're pretty more progressive when it comes to, because it's one thing about the digital badge, but then it's another thing about portfolios. Because even on our campus, we're talking about like, okay, who has a portfolio? How do we build these portfolios? Many of them are websites. Many of them use D2L. They use some other entity. But over in the UK, they're taking a little bit more aggressive approach that a portfolio is essential to the student's learning. Number one, even starting through K through 12. They have to have a portfolio. They have to show their work. Over here, I think more of our art schools are doing it more so. They traditionally have done it, but now we're catching up, and I see vast potential for research and exploratory things, but I believe over in the UK, based upon the Badge Alliance that I'm part of, they're a little bit more progressive in that area. So here, it's portfolio, then badging, and how they relate.
But I think that movement to the student information systems is going to do what you're talking about.
Yes.
It will provide that filter for what at least the school has acknowledged as meaningful badges. And they're going to pick up those icons and put them in. And I had a slide of that on the original thing that I had sent you, but I don't know if it's in here. But so every day when a student logs in, they see where they're at, right? Especially it's becoming much more refined at the high school level. So they know where they are against the Michigan Merit Curriculum credits and then what their school requires to graduate. Maybe if they've taken the ACT or SAT, those results are already on there. But now what we've done is carve out a little window on that SIS dashboard for students that we want to place badges in. And so that's where that particular thing will happen. The academic filter will happen there. And then kids can take that they can send that electronic thing to a university or a future employer, and then each one of those icons can be activated for the details around the issuer, which I think Jake did a great job of describing when that's important, and then the credentials, like the criteria that was required for the badge. I'm afraid what's going to happen is the kids are going to start getting these at such a rate that they're going to have like a really long screen because I think kids will really glom onto this.
Well, I was thinking too, I mean, at some point it might be interesting to explore actually teaching badge recipients, in this case kids. I mean, maybe, I don't know if this is a 4-H program or not, maybe there's still a lot of development that has to happen here. But, you know, it comes down to the age-old thing, okay, whenever you do any of these things, whether you're applying to a college or you're trying to get a job or whatever it might be, you're selling yourself. And you know, here's another opportunity, a resource, or a tool that says, hey, look what I've done, and this is meaningful. And it's not just you saying, well, yeah, I went to a robotics thing, or I learned about renewable energy, and I created my own biofuel. It's somebody else substantiating that, right? It's not just you saying you did it, which you would use that to sell yourself, certainly, but here's another level of accreditation or support that goes along with that. And I think that's one of the pieces, at least as we've looked at badges, that's missing is the wrong word, because it's evolving. I don't want to say it's missing, because I think it just hasn't happened yet. I don't think it's missing. But I think that's one of the things that drives it. If users are saying it's important and making people pay attention to it, and it aligns to what we hear from employers. They're saying, okay, sure, send me your transcript, right? Or give me your resume. Okay, that tells me a certain number of things. It allows me to kind of easily compare you against everyone else, right? Because everyone has a resume that usually looks about the same physically. But now here's something that could really differentiate you from others that are out there, particularly if you can display it, if you will, in such a way that's different.
Yeah, and I like the word different. What troubles me is, like, I really is using it in an old fashion, in an old way.
The old thinking.
Yeah. It has to be a different view on how we use these badges and what they actually represent. It can't really be like, well, we're just using it as a replacement. I don't know if that'll work.
Yeah, because I agree with you, because I can see where, I don't know, let's say I'm trying to think of things that have competitive components for kids that are this age, right? So, I mean, I just can't think of a really good example. I mean, maybe it is college admission. And if you're trying to get into a STEM program at a university or so, or you're an engineering program, you could, I mean, sure, could you hand them the whole screen or point them to the whole screen? Yeah, you could, but probably what's more meaningful are the things that are specifically representative of the elements of what's going to matter to that admission group or that criteria. And you're going to have so many things that show your diversity in that space other than just what's on your transcript, or it may be reinforced in your transcript if, in fact, those things are able to show up there.
Well, and I think the portability of the badges is getting to that, because you could tweet a future employer this thing. And that, to me, would be another, say, okay, I've got a lot of stuff on my transcript or whatever.
Pay attention.
Pay attention to this. And so the way it comes to you and what it implies will couple to make that impression or punctuate how important it was to the student or the applicant. I think that will be interesting.
And it really is. Oh, sorry, go ahead.
So will I be able, based on that value that you're talking about, to a recruiting officer or whoever, will I be able to charge more for the program since there's an expected value based on getting a badge? So will a badge program cost more than a non-badge program?
So a certifying program versus not. I don't know. What do you think? I mean, it won't affect, typically we don't charge our 4th and 5th graders to come to an after-school program or whatever. But into high school and college age, maybe. I mean, that's nothing we've thought about for sure.
It wouldn't for us, but that doesn't mean some people wouldn't. Because I think you're right, value would be placed differently. And if you're a young person or family that sees the value in that and you're choosing between 3 or 4 different camps, you're probably likely to go to the one that's got a digital badge.
Yeah, actually I have 2 questions. The first one I have is there any coordination or collaboration with other groups like Dedecker or JA in terms of trying to establish badging? Because I think that would help, kind of cement the concept of tracking youth achievement, early on. I know I was involved in Dedecker and they had medals and stuff that they would issue and things like that. So that's my first question. The second question, if you could elaborate more on OpenID and how that works, and is there like a timeline, I guess, for implementing that to open it up?
I'll take it because
the OpenID is your question.
Yeah, it's similar. Like if you go into like Instagram or something like that, and you want to sign up for an Instagram account, and it has multiple ways that you can sign up, whether it's through Gmail, Facebook, that type of OpenID. Because currently we've been in talks about it, and we started with using the community IDs because at first it was just you could only use it if you had a MSU Net ID account. So we're trying to put that on the trajectory for this upcoming year on how we implement it, and also changing the design, not systematically, but the user UX design to make it more usable. I know with Jacob, what was your experience with it?
Yeah, because first the kids coming from all over the state didn't have MSU emails, so we had to go the community route, and thankfully we were able to do that. That was a big limit for us.
Yeah, and because they're not MSU students, we had to do the link, had to send the link out in order for them to accept it. But one step they had to do was they had to create their community IDs, which they did quite easily, and then they had to sign into the badging system, so we knew, and we pulled that number, and so they were able to download their badge.
So the OpenID is kind of like just compared to something like a Facebook authentication, like something.
Correct.
Mm-hmm. And did they have to set up Gmail emails, or could they use any?
Any.
I know that we had a discussion, but I didn't know where it ended up.
So is also the purpose while they're doing the pilots with the SIS system, the Illuminate for the EISDs, can other school administrators open up and have a community ID and use MSU's badging system to start programs and stuff?
We're not quite there yet. We're getting there. Yeah, that's the thing. We're getting there. Currently we're in talks about creating a system for MDE usage only. We're not at MSU right now. We're not trying to get into the credentialing because there's a lot of flare up about that, about actually doing credentialing within higher ed. But I'm glad you brought this up. And as Rashad was talking about the partnership, I really felt that this pilot was quite unique because it shows the symbiotic relationship higher ed should have with K through 12. We create these systems for experiential learning, and they're easily to adapt to it versus us as well. But we should be doing this a lot when it comes to education because we get the K through 12 learners into higher ed.
Yeah, I was just saying that a couple weeks ago. I was saying, I just don't understand the system.
Yeah.
The higher ed should be focused on K through 12 in order to improve those steps, to get them there.
Oh yeah, even with
there is a pre-K 20 commission, the governor's commission and I've been on it since it started, and there's a ton of advancement that's happened now. And the communication between pre-K all the way up through PhD, which is what it stands for, is really dramatically improved. And like right now, you guys are in your 3rd year of accepting the student's UIC code. which they get in preschool if they come to school before kindergarten, and they carry with them now all the way into university. And so we're getting feedback from universities on how many of our students needed remedial classes on entry and where they are 1, 2, 3, and 4 years later. Are they part of a 5th or 6th year cohort? So that's all going into the future. And that is established now. That exists. But back to your question, we only dream at MDE like of a system where junior achievement or DECA or anybody could apply to open it up. And actually what I learned from this, and Jake was the issuer, it's that issuer piece that becomes important.
Yes.
So you don't have to open it up to the entire world. You have to invite issuers to become part of a system that MDE could then kind of use and acknowledge and go to with teachers to haul off badges and consider badges for credit. And that would be like a dream world. I don't know if we'll get there because like there's all sorts of freestanding things like Credly and all that where you can make badges. And then that's going to have to be another wave of stuff. But yeah, if we could make that happen, I'd be so happy.
And that's one of the challenges and the opportunities with this is things have popped up like popcorn all over the place. Right. There isn't an organization, there's not leadership here that's saying we need to move in this direction, which in part puts MSU IT in an interesting perspective. Because as we talk to other schools and institutes, one of the big limiting factors for them is how do I do what Keesa does?
Yeah.
And we say, talk to Keesa.
Yeah.
Because there's not a lot of places
I feel
that have
valued.
platform.
I'm at the right place, right?
But if we wanted to, or if your group wanted to, there is an opportunity to have a centralized location that we could feed some of this thing through that would allow MDE and other entities to have some consistency and some leadership through this. I'm not aware of anybody else that's done that.
Maybe a partnership with the common education or something.
Yeah, so whatever, like I know for me personally, that is where I would love to move because otherwise teachers it's going to be almost impossible for them to go to every pop-up spot. Now it is up to the student to aggregate those things in those little backpacks. So we at least have that point at the student level, but like what's happening right now with the first robotics, the high school robotics group, they don't have any place right now. They're homeless as far as a badge creation location. And because they've just gone crazy with this idea, they're going to actually have the students involved in robotics design the badges with specific criteria. Has to have the year, has to have the logo, has to have a few pieces in it. And then that's going to become part of their statewide competition is who won the design, the digital badge design project component. And so we've got so many balls up in the air, it's not even funny. First, forget about finding a home to go get them. You know, least of all, that's the least of our problems right now. And so the logistics are exciting, but I do think that this is a place where you guys already have exhibited that leadership, and it's so needed. It's so needed.
Well, in the system that you were talking about before of having it integrated within there is really key because it goes to your question earlier. Now you have these digital badges. What do you do with them? And kind of an analogy is if you're really pursuing for a job, maybe there's a couple different venues. So you have 2 or 3 different resumes that you have that you go towards. You also have your select group of digital badges that you might accompany with this resume and with that resume. And how we've kind of described it a little bit is in concert, digital badges work with your resume, work with GPA, provide a more holistic picture of what a person can bring to the table as far as the skill set. So it really is working in concert. It is a different way of doing it, but it's an addition to. And what we really need is, so okay, you have the capabilities of doing that, just as you have the capability to apply for, to come to MSU, apply for a job, send your resume, you have your digital badges you can send with that. There's not a specific space that's been earmarked to house digital badges. That's the organizational structure that's really lacking. So you might individually have the choice to email somebody. Somebody may not know what a digital badge is or really have the ability to accept it. We've talked a little bit with MSU admissions because we work with them in a different facet on what that might look like for them just conceptually. But that's where we need to go. But having a system that allows it to put in there is the first really structure or framework that we can stick them all in together and say, here they are as a family, and that's really helpful.
you know, the day we met over at you with your programmer guys over at IT, that was fun. That was really fun for me. But because they're going, well, wait a minute, what about this? And what about that? And what about in perpetuity and the server space? And I'm going, yeah, just make it happen. Right? That's all magic. But it was interesting because it's the open ID and it's the open space to go and grab it. So for us, what MDE is looking at is if we provide grant funds for future projects, we want to make this an option. Like if right now, every robotics team can apply for $6,000 per team for their robot costs and stuff. And with that would come the opportunity for them to participate in digital badging. So we're boldly saying that. We have no idea where they're going to live, but that's okay because we know that there's at least some of the open spots where we could put them if we have to. We would rather that they are in the K-12 community at the university level so that it's an automatic place to pass off information and have employers, you know, and then also issuers know. It's huge.
Well, and school administrators to get their feet wet and just get into it, you know, have a place to go to start.
And the school administrators and teachers really have a different role, and it's that filtering piece of what is meaningful to our crediting system or our acknowledgement system. Well, even if it's a personal acknowledgement, you guys, if you have children, you have sat through your share of awards banquets. This is another place where this stuff is going to crop up, and we really want kids who earn this to be acknowledged. So we're trying to build in my particular case, you know, they have a senior graduation luncheon for all of our districts on Mackinac Island every year. And I said, I want to see some of these kids that are earning digital badges be acknowledged just as much as anybody else. So they're making a space for that.
One question I have, you know, I'm very familiar with badging from the gamification side of things, and this is kind of my first introduction to seeing it being applied to more academic, professional kinds of uses, and I think it's really fascinating. Like you guys, your project is very, very interesting, and I see a lot of uses. But in terms of like the perception from employers, is it really catching on, I guess, in terms of, you know, really seeing this as a valid...
It's what you guys have said. It's so different.
Well, I believe more so in like the IT, like web development community, because that's really what Mozilla had kind of built it for. It was for like these hardcore capabilities, like web design, things like that. I've gotten some for risk management, web 101. You know, those are good things to have, especially in the IT field. On, you know, it's not always about the degree, but it's about what you're constantly learning and what you add. So more so in that area, in a way. I do think there are a lot of opportunities out there where they're giving away badges, especially in MOOCs in some sort of fashion. So yeah, it's growing. It's growing.
The Western Cooperative on Education and Technology, WCET, did a presentation probably about 6 months ago, maybe approaching 9 months ago, and they took a bunch of interviewed and surveyed and interviewed a bunch of employers kind of in the out west, basically. And almost unanimously, those employers said, if you could give me something, and it was sprinkled with digital badging, right? But they said, if you could give me something that would really truly help me understand, because they look at a resume and they don't have any idea what that stuff is, right? and everybody puts a spin on it. So, you know, Jacob and I might have done almost identical things in college.
Right.
But maybe Jacob's a much better spin artist than I am. So his resume is going to look maybe physically, but what it portrays is going to be a whole lot better than what I've been able to say, but maybe I'm actually better than Jacob, right, or vice versa, right? And so help an employer understand what in the world these things that you list under your bullet points mean. Have you really done them? Did you just study them theoretically? What happens? And that's where employers are saying, okay, this tells me something. If it's meaningful, if there's some standardization, so they don't have to go try to figure it out, or they can look at it. And so, at least in that case, and that's just one study, and I'd be careful to call it a study, it's one experiment. And employers are saying, yes, please give me something different. Give me something that helps me understand really what Keesa can do.
Mm-hmm.
And then it was mentioned, when you look at some of these, I always hate to call them softer skills,
They're not.
because they're not really the softer skills. When you look at, okay, what experience do you have in problem solving?
Right.
That's really what organizations need. I don't, yeah, we need smart people, but have you ever really actually worked on a team and solved a problem? Have you ever done that? And that, you can say that in a resume, it can be a bullet point, but what did that really mean? What did that look like? And a badge can portray that. A badge can show that. So it's interesting.
And there is more data out there saying what those employers are looking for as far as problem solving and communication skills as being bigger and more important than ever before. And in my interactions with it, it's been similar. Conceptually, they're on board. This is what they need. They know that they want it. Do they know that it comes in the form of a digital badge? Probably not yet, at least not in most circles. However, it is seeming to grow. Sharon, we did a recent interview with U.S. World News and Report, who were picking up on digital badging and online learning, and they found out about this project, and so they wanted to know more. So I think as the public gamut continues to grow in interest in this area, it will snowball. We're not where we need to be yet, but we're getting there.
And just from a professional standpoint, and this was so interesting to me because it came up since we started working together. In this student information system, there's a data system that is also associated with it. It's huge. So it has kids' data starting from preschool all the way through college. And it's really complex. So every once in a while when you're working in that system, you get a little badge. And I never really looked at it until we started working on it. And I went into my profile to see how many badges I had. But when I clicked on the badges, it also told me who in my region, in my 19 districts, also had that badge. And so like the data creator badge, which I thought, oh, I was really struggling with an issue. I clicked on it, saw who else was in my small group. Out of my 700 teachers or so, there were about 15 teachers or administrators that had that. And I did email someone I knew from that contact and said, hey, I see you've messed around in this area quite a bit. Can you help me with this? So I think that there's also like an internal acknowledgement of having reached some level. I had no idea what it really meant, like how many reports I had to write or anything to trigger that badge, but I knew that these 15 people had struggled as much as I had to do X, Y, or Z. It was very helpful.
And to me, that's an organic growth.
It is an organic growth.
Yeah. From the leaderboard, when you're playing video games and you're trying to see, well, who got the most slash badges? You see who's doing better than you, but in this case, you see who else has obtained that, and you go have a conversation with them.
Exactly. And I think for an employer who's trying to see, you said you know how to use DNA. That's the system. It's called DNA. What can you really do? Show me your badges that you've got in there. I think that would be phenomenal because people are hiring. Actually, people are stealing people from other ISDs or districts based on their ability to use some of these complex data systems. I would start asking that question, and I will start asking that question because I know about it now. Yeah. Because I've seen the profile and where these things are housed within that.
Hey, Paul, we have a couple of people here from outside MSU. I'm just curious of your perspective. We talk a lot about this inside, but in your area, Paul, is this emerging? Is this stagnant? Is this not even being considered? Where does it kind of stand in your space? Maybe tell where you're from and what you do. But,
well, part of the time I am an MSU person. I work for the president, but the rest of my time I work for the Michigan Fitness Foundation. Well, actually, I figured I would go back and talk to some folks because we should be doing badging in the physical activity teacher prep if we're not. So, within the university, an opportunity that's opening up, but I don't see anybody yet doing anything with it, is MSU is actually a leader in something called the T-square student. And the T-square is a characterization of the fact that what we want is a student who leaves here with deep knowledge in one area. Actually, we say 2 areas now because we also want them to have deep computational skills. But then the T at the top is all those associated skills that make them a good employee and a good person. And so they're going to get a degree that's going to take care of the deep skill, but how are they going to document the rest of the characteristics that they've learned in their dorms and neighborhoods and participating in classes? So there's a real opportunity there for a badging system as well. So,
Eric, any thoughts on where?
I don't see it being used at all in K-12 right now. I've been all over the U.S. and I've been heavily involved in tech. And I don't see anybody talking about discussing it anywhere.
We're issuing them for our first Lego robotics this year.
Yeah, and I guess I heard you talk about the Lego robotics, and I had not. I'm not involved in that. I know STEM. We're just getting STEM labs in our large district that I'm in right now. We're just starting. That's just that part's coming on. But as far as badging, I guess it would be. It seems tough because of who's giving the credentials and what's going to stop students from just wanting to earn badges quickly and fast. And I mean, those are. I see those would be what principals would say. What would who's giving these badges? What's the credentials behind them? I guess if you take the Boy Scouts, I understand the badging there, and those are very well received badges, right? Somebody earns these badges, they went through all that work. So I guess I haven't seen a model. I mean, so I know you guys are just the beginning.
Yeah.
I guess it'd be interesting to see. I would like to see it, and then and be we would love to do something with it. I mean, start working with it, but
and this is the research piece, and we have talked a little bit about this because now we know who's earned the badges, and we have all these student information systems. We can start to look now how those students perform on these assessments that they unfortunately have to take 8 million of. We're going to be able to start to see that breakout very soon. As soon as students starts to get those. Like we know because of the work that we did here, we know exactly which standards were represented in Jake's badges. We're going to be able to see how they did on their high school physical. Let's see, that would be physical science and life science outcomes, and did that enhance their outcomes compared to their peer group? And that's exactly where I think the educational research stuff will start to validate this. We're going through the same thing with online courses in K-12 because we don't know the course quality necessarily if we're buying from an external vendor. And so we're trying to look at their outcomes and then go back to the experiences that they had. And that is really a huge area of gigantic interest, but this is going to come into it.
The badges, I guess when I'm looking at the badges being offered, yours was after school programs. Mm-hmm. Are we talking about offering badges for classes that are in? Is that they're taking,
no,
is it always going to be after school programs, or is it something they can take an elective and they can earn a badge for that elective that they chose? Or
you said you're building a STEM lab. Do you have a STEM class?
We do, yes.
Okay.
No.
So your STEM class is going to look different than the STEM class of another teacher based on what they're exploring, because it's such a wide open area. You could have a badge in your STEM class for whatever your challenge for the year was. We have a bunch of kids that just built a drone and now Loyola's using it to fly over the bays in the Cedarville area and take pictures and stuff. So that's their focus for their STEM class this year, but that's probably not the focus in your area. So to make those distinctions more subtly, you could use badges. That's how I would see it. Experiential learning.
Right.
Yeah. So.
Yeah, there has to be some, a badge isn't anything if it doesn't have a meaning behind it.
And a deep meaning. Talking about his T thing,
right.
It has to have deep meaning. And it has to show results in the academic achievement area for these skills.
For sure. Yeah, I also think, like like the badges is one layer, but I think behind it is also, I think in terms of how our society is evolving and being more social and collaborative, and in terms of kind of to your question in terms of what's the credibility of these issuers, I think the communities and the people who utilize these badges or receive them will give it credibility. And some, there will be just like with a university, you know, you might have a correspondence degree that might not hold up to one from Princeton, but it's been history and a level of documented excellence that made that determination. You know, so likewise, I think the digital badging and issuers, their credibility will kind of develop over time and organically.
I think that's a good question. Kind of end with, here's a quick example. The advisors, I believe in social science one, they want badges. I'm like, okay, why? And they were like, well, we have these first level students and we just want to give them a badge. And I'm like, why? What's the motivation behind it? And at the end, you know, I had told them they have to create some sort of ecosystem that makes these badges meaningful, not just to the people who are they're issuing to, but it's this ecosystem that it has a high level meaning to it, where the student is saying like, well, yeah, I'm going to get this badge because I know if I get so many badges, I get a Michigan State t-shirt or I go on and obtain stuff. And so they had to come back and, you know, they stepped back a little bit and was like, hey, we need to think about it because maybe it needs to be more of a collaborative effort between other advisors on campus to make it kind of more meaningful and kind of using, what are those hubs called in the dorms now?
Neighborhood?
The neighborhoods. The neighborhoods,
Oh,
maybe they
okay.
need to connect to the neighborhoods now. Maybe they need to start talking about that. Because your question is very valid and very important. It has to be like, okay, so what's the point? There has to be some motivation behind it in order for the, not just the issuer, but the user to actually want to obtain it and use it.
No, and I'd use another word I think that pairs with this, and that's accountability. Accountability on the issuer, that if 4-H is going to do a program, we're going to make sure that it's on those learning standards and put out, which is a little bit scary now because a lot of that stuff's not out there. So I'm a little bit apprehensive. We've got badges that are working now that people are going to use, and I can't go out and delete them. They're in the digital backpack. So I want to make sure we set a solid standard now that makes us accountable. The young people are accountable for learning, and then the third step is where you're at, is how locally can we help those make those decisions that can integrate that in meaningful ways. Sometimes those are individual decisions. Maybe there's not a blanket standard we can create, but there's a lot of things that we can move forward with. I'll say one thing on how 4-H has kind of done this a little bit is out of our 20,000 volunteers, we've got a lot of teachers that are 4-H volunteers, a lot of teachers that are connected to 4-H and some of the renewables camp that we have. So while there might not be a decision locally that says, I know you guys, you 4-H members have participated in this and got a digital badge, and I'm a teacher and I understand that. Maybe there's not something that they can do to say this is going to go towards your high school degree or credits and whatnot, but they are using informally saying, and it's kind of what Michelle was saying earlier, why don't you stand up and tell us what you learned about this, because we're talking about this subject and I know you had this experience. So locally within the classroom, that is starting to mobilize softly, and the young people are telling their teachers and administrators, I did this, I have a digital badge, it's more than I just did this camp, it's waving MSU and MDEs, I got this badge, what should we do about it? So that is kind of raising up at the grassroots level to help us have some of those conversations.
I want to be mindful of time. It's the 11:30 space right now. Can we give a round of applause to Jacob, Michelle, and Keesa? Thank you very much. We'll formally end in case you have to move on, but please, as long as these folks have time, feel free to ask them any more questions or whatnot.